Today's moon shooter is Claudio Gil, a trusted CPA who helps business owners keep more of what they earn and plan smarter for growth.
CPA will actually play the role of an advisor in your business who can provide guidance as you grow and start your business.
In this chat, you'll learn simple ways to make tax season less painful and finances more predictable.
To me, that's what it means to be a good CPA, a good advisor, someone who can provide trust. It comes with taking the time, educating the client. I want to give them the power to be successful, the knowledge that it takes to make the best decision for them.
Claudio Gil CPA is also the sponsor of this episode, so big thanks to Claudio and his team for the support. Now, dear friends, here's Claudio Gil. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So I've been trying to find a joke for CPA for the last 15 minutes. I couldn't find any that could be told here. So do you have any CPA joke to start off?
I do, yeah. So a lot of people will ask, what does CPA stand for? Cheapest person alive.
Good one.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The other day we were with a pilot and we were also looking for jokes around pilot. We find one. What is the pilot's favorite type of bagel?
I'm not sure.
Plain.
Plain bagel, yeah. Yep.
Because it's plain,
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So you are a CPA.
Yes.
What is the role of a CPA in a small business?
Yeah, a CPA should really be a trusted advisor. First and foremost, they're an accountant. They are licensed through the state. And so part of that licensing requires taking exams, having experience requirements, another CPA to sign off on your license before it's actually granted to you. And so a CPA will actually play the role of an advisor in your business, similar to almost an attorney or other professional who can provide guidance as you grow and start your business.
And when do business owners need to start thinking of hiring a CPA?
Well, a lot of people will start off not going the route of a CPA, thinking that it might be too expensive for them as they start out. I would actually advise the opposite in that, yes, it isn't a higher expense upfront to go with a professional like a CPA, but you're actually setting up a stronger foundation for your business as you grow. And so that amount of income can look different depending on each individual business owner's needs as well as the nature of the business. You definitely want to start looking at it once you become profitable and you're dealing with different tax rates that you might not have been used to in the past. Is a good time to start connecting with the CPA.
What does a good tax bracket look like in that area?
Everyone's taxes are unique to them, right? So we have to consider what they're used to paying, whether or not they're used to paying estimates on a quarterly basis, which might be required for self-employed individuals, or if they're expecting a refund at the end of the year and they don't get that refund, is that something that they should bring up with a tax professional like a CPA who can provide them guidance on why that might have happened compared to what they were expecting?
So, for example, we recently start working together. You're Parrots Labs CPA now, so you know all this, the expenses you were just telling me, like you now realize where all this money is going.
Right.
So, but do you think companies like us is the right time to hire a CPA, or we're too early or we're too late?
I think Parrots Lab, right on time. I think you were coming to me at a time where you're expecting higher growth. You've invested a lot into the business already. You've put a lot of time and energy, and you're starting to see returns on those investments as well. At the time we're recording this, we're about to enter Q4 of 2025. And so with Q4 2025 on the horizon, what does that mean for your business or for another small business owner? It really depends on where they're at in their process. And so if you're experiencing growth, you've invested a lot already, and you're worried, maybe not worried, but you want to get it off on the right foot for next year and the foundation for your business, you're connecting with a tax professional.
This is the second business I run. I previously ran my family business, which is a private school in the education business. And I was one of those who were like, oh no, let's not hire a CPA. It's too expensive. And I ended up paying half the price because when I was about to exit the school, I want to sell it. No one was looking at it. And then we're going to delve deep into the mistakes that business owners make when it comes to this. So if you can elaborate on that, the top 3 mistakes or that you see business owners make.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great example of a pitfall that a lot of small business owners will fall into is maybe talking to a CPA too late. I always advise my clients, and this is how I approach my practice as well, begin with the end in mind, right? So if you're not quite sure what your business is looking like yet at the time you're just starting off, maybe take some time to do some soul searching and find out exactly what you want from your business and what you want to give to your business as well. And if you have more clarity on that, you'll know more about what kind of advice you're looking for from your CPA. Some CPAs are transactional, and that could be a mistake that a small business owner might find themselves dealing with as well, where they know that they hear about a CPA, they know they should be connecting with one that it's going to be a good advisor for their business. But if they don't find the right CPA for their needs, depending on what that small business owner's goals are, then they could find themselves spending a lot of time or money with someone who's not going to provide as much value to their business. At the same time, getting set up with the right tax structure is very important for small business owners. A lot of people hear S corporation. I tell my clients there's a certain time for the S corporation that makes sense. Getting into it too early can cost you a lot more in professional fees to maintain that S corporation status compared to waiting until it's the right time where the cost savings, the tax savings are well worth the benefit, right? If the juice is not worth the squeeze, don't go for it. But who's going to tell you that other than a CPA? Because you're not going to get that from TikTok.
Yeah.
You're not going to get that from a YouTube short where you're not really able to ask someone a question. And so it's really important that you're connecting with a proactive advisor instead of a transactional CPA to get those questions answered and with a certain idea of what you're looking for out of that relationship. I would say probably those are the two most common mistakes: is connecting with the wrong kind of CPA. Not every CPA is equal. And then also following advice off of TikTok or something that they read on the internet without clarifying that strategy with a professional.
Right. Is there anything completely absurd that you've seen on social media that you can recall?
A lot of people will talk about like photographers maybe, or people who like to travel, and being able to write off a lot of those expenses. Those are the most heavily scrutinized expenses by the IRS. They're always
Really?
going to look at meals and travel for small business owners, especially if they don't have a formal advisor or someone that's guiding them through being able to write off those deductions. There's a time and place for business meals and business travel, but it's not your family vacation that you're going to and you're claiming it as a business trip all because you wanted to take your family out and reduce your taxes. It doesn't work like that.
I want to clarify the differences between a CPA that you hire throughout the year, that kind of like what you mentioned, the trusted advisor, the one that you check in every quarter, versus hiring some tax person to do your taxes by the end of the year. So can you tell me the differences and why the second one is the wrong approach?
Yeah, it depends on everyone's what they're looking for out of their relationships. For some people, they don't even want to think about their taxes. They just want it to be done, know that it's done, and then wait until next year for the same thing to happen again, right? Other people are a little bit more focused and dialed in on maybe their goals or their finances. They want to have a clear idea of when to spend, how much to spend, and then how to reduce how much they're spending with their taxes specifically. And so I always encourage people when they're talking or looking for a CPA or even a tax professional in general, find someone who's going to be proactive with your situation. You know, the alternative is a lot of people using TurboTax, H&R Block. They do a great job. They really do for handling the less complex tax situations. If you're a W-2 income earner, there's not a lot of activity in terms of, you know, you're not being compensated through stock compensation, and maybe you're a homeowner, you have a couple dependents. H&R Block, TurboTax, they can handle that situation. And you don't really need the same person to do your taxes every year because your situation is not going to really change as significantly compared to someone who's just started a small business. Maybe they just acquired their first rental property and they're not quite sure how their income is going to shake out by the end of the year. You probably want a proactive professional who's going to be able to answer your questions and guide you, help you paint a picture for what to plan for by the time you file your taxes.
I recently had an interesting conversation with a person who owns a pretty sizable business. So to give you context, he has 3 branches. He's a brick and mortar store, but he is also in manufacturing. So he has a back end, some sort of factory. But then he has like 3 branches in terms of stores. And I totally assumed that he has a CPA.
Mm-hmm.
Upon talking to him, he was like, oh no, I don't have a CPA. I was like, oh, you're relying on your bookkeeper. He's like, no, I don't have a bookkeeper either. And now I'm like, really?
Right.
So, and then I start poking more, and I told him like, but why? Right? This is the question. Why?
Mm-hmm.
He said, I don't want anyone to know how much I make. What can you say to that person?
So it's being a CPA and working with a small business owner, especially someone who's very established and kind of high guarded, you're put in a position where you're having access to a lot of confidential information, very sensitive, people's finances and livelihoods. And a lot of people do not want to provide that information willingly or freely as maybe they should when they're working with a trusted advisor. The most important thing is really finding the right CPA for you. I mean, if that's going to be the takeaway of the theme of our conversation, that would not be a bad thing for the audience to take away, is find the right CPA for you. Make sure it's someone that you trust. There are stories out there of CPAs who will just charge and they're more transactional. They don't really provide that guidance that small business owner is looking for. But in those cases like that, someone who's got 3 branches, it's a pretty big operation. Maybe they have a back end, manufacturing taking place for their products, and then they're distributing it at 3 different locations. You want some sort of professional giving you some guidance, someone that you can trust. And so if that trust is not there inherently from the beginning, you're not going to have a successful relationship. Me as a CPA is not going to have a successful relationship with that client. And that small business owner is not going to have a successful relationship with their CPA. I would encourage that small business owner or that business owner to take some time trying to meet different CPAs and see if there's one that makes more sense for his situation.
You're stressing on the word trust. And trust is usually something that takes time to build. And everybody has a story where they trusted someone and at first they looked great, but then they got stabbed after.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what are some indications that this is a CPA person or firm that I can trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from my experience, building trust comes from the perspective of taking the time with the client for them to understand exactly what you're providing in terms of services as a CPA. Taxes are very complicated, especially in the US. They're probably way more complicated than they need to be. And so if you're working with a tax professional who can give you that time to help you understand, educate you on what exactly are the implications of the decisions you're making with the business structure, whether or not you should be an LLC taxed as a sole proprietorship, S corporation, and what that difference means in the eyes of the IRS and for your business. If it's someone who's taking the time to guide you through that and help you make the best decision for yourself, not so much that they're making the decision for you. You want to have the information you need to make the best decision for yourself. To me, that's what it means to be a good CPA, a good advisor, someone who can provide trust. It comes with taking the time, educating the client, because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. At least that's what I believe in, and that's what I want to give to my clients. I want to give them the power to be successful, the knowledge that it takes to make the best decision for them.
When I started my career, I left from Lebanon to Saudi Arabia, was my first job, right? So I'm 21, 22, and I went to a very conservative country at the time. So it's a very hard place for a bachelor. So the way I survived there is my books. Mm-hmm. So that is the period where I read like the majority of the books I've ever read in my life. Probably like 400 books or something in a period of 3-4 years. Mm. One of the books that stood out is called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey, I believe, or his son. And the reason why I loved that book so much is because it demystified that word trust. Because trust is like love, right? How would you define love? It's so hard. There's no direct definition in the dictionary. Like love equals that. And same with trust. It's like hard to. But that book did a very good job. And it basically described trust as a combination of character and competence. The character component means that, is this person have moral values? Do they have integrity? Do they have the right intent? And then competence is that, do they have a track record of success? Do they have the right credentials, etc.? And a very good example for that would be a doctor or a surgeon. So for example, if you're feeling sick, would you go to a doctor that is extremely moral, extremely, that they have high standard, high values, but they don't have the credentials. They don't have, the last person who they operated on died, for example. Now, that will break your trust because they don't have the competence for it. On the other side, if that doctor has 100% success rate, but you know that his main intent is to charge and take your money, so he will probably fabricate an illness just for him to charge you the 5,000 or whatever. And so that also breaks the trust. So I love that book because it kind of combines character with competence. So I think that when we talk about concepts like trust, and we both are in a trust-based business. When clients hire Parrots Lab, they're hiring someone that they want to know that if I promise you that I will deliver this result, I will do it. And so I think looking at trust in the lens of, okay, how can I demonstrate to the other person that I am a person of integrity? How can I demonstrate that this is my intent? Am I transparent with my dealings? Am I going to say the hard things, even if it's going to be against my benefit?
Right.
So at the same time, how can I demonstrate my credentials? Obviously, you worked so hard on your CPA, and we chatted a little bit about how hard that exam is. And I told you about many friends of mine who have tried it 5 times and failed all the time. So I think, how would you demonstrate to potential clients those attributes? Although it cannot be like so direct sometimes, you have to indirectly. But is there anything that you use in terms of, first approach with clients?
I think the most important thing is probably, and a lot of people will say this differently, but it's your word. Being impeccable with your word is what I use. And I actually learned this from The 4 Agreements, which is a book by Don Miguel Ruiz, I believe. And the first agreement, and it's agreements, philosophies about how to live your life. But the first agreement that you're supposed to live with is to be impeccable with your word. And to me, what that means is to do what you're going to do when you say you're going to do it with, with no explanation about what it took to do that. You have to stick to your word because that is the most important way to build up trust. That's something that only you can provide is your word. And only you can keep is your word. No one can force you to keep it. You can't fake it. You have to be genuine. And so being impeccable with your word, keeping your word, it also can be considered, a form of integrity is being impeccable with your word and keeping your word. Also, and you were starting to get at this as well in your conversation, was being willing to deliver the hard news when you don't want to, or when the client doesn't want to hear it, or they want to hear something else. You have to be that person who can deliver that news to them, even if it's the last thing that they want to hear. And that's super important because, especially I think in this industry, being a service-based industry, a trust-based industry, and dealing with people's livelihoods, it's not just that business owner and that business that's on the line. It's that business owner's family. It's that business owner's legacy. It's your client's legacy. It's your client's employees, their livelihoods, their families. And to be in a position where you're providing that kind of guidance and they're relying on your word, I think is a huge trust opportunity, an opportunity to build trust, but also a huge cost if something were to happen and you weren't living with integrity or fulfilling on that trust.
I love it. What was the book again?
It's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. I highly recommend it. It's a short read. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's good to know also that you're a person who reads.
I think it's very important. What I've heard also, this is from another book, is that if your business is your vehicle to wealth and to building a legacy, reading and digesting new information is like getting an oil change.
I love that.
You get that oil change. You're good for 5,000 miles, whatever the efficiency is on your vehicle. But what got you there is not going to get you to the next phase of your business. And so when you digest and try to learn new information, you get that oil change. Your vehicle can go a lot farther. It'll be more efficient. You'll have a smoother ride. So I think it's really important to read and to be continuously learning. Yeah.
I love it. I used to read a lot of physical books. Now I look forward when I have a road trip. For example, sometimes I get asked to deliver a workshop in Temecula or like far, like kind of like a long drive. And I love these opportunities because I can turn on Audible, decide on a book, and then by the time I go and come back, I'm almost done with that book. So I listen to a lot of my books right now. But as you said, it's like fuel.
Yep.
Like it's like you recharge whenever, because when you're busy every day working on your business, you're not nourishing your brain. I always say that it's what we feed our brain. It's the books we read and the people we meet. That's what they said.
I agree 100%.
So back to that person who has 3 branches and his company is, I'm assuming his company makes like maybe $500,000 or if not more. And he's resisting a CPA. What would be the main argument? Like if let's say you are in a debate and someone is like pro the motion and someone's against it. What would be your argument?
I would say you'll only be able to grow in such a limited fashion. And I've actually come across this with some of my clients where for the last 20 years, they're a big business. I mean, a bigger business. They have more than 50 employees, between 50 to 100 employees, and they've been in business for 20 plus years. They never had a true professional guiding them on the financial aspects of their business. And yes, they managed to stay in business for 25 years. They employ over 50 individuals, and they're supporting a lot of people with their business as well as the business owner's family. But they can only get so far before it catches up with them. And I saw that in this client, and they came to me when it was too late. They needed to secure financing. They were growing very rapidly. They didn't have the proper financial records that would make them lendable with a financial institution like a bank or any credible lender. And so they did achieve financing through a very predatory loan. Their business grew too fast. Their liabilities exceeded the amount of cash that they were able to produce. And they defaulted on a lot of their debts with their creditors and with some of their vendors as well. And when that happens, you break so much, there's so much that comes down. The legacy comes down, the trust between those vendors and your business comes down. And it can be very difficult to rebuild from that. But that's the style that they decided to grow their business in, is because they had a certain perspective about what a CPA does, or maybe the fact that they didn't need a CPA, and they can only get so far with that kind of perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not trying to suggest that this person I'm talking about has something shady to hide, but let's say you engage with a client and then you start discovering that this client is operating some shady cash business, some sort of. Are you under obligation to report that? What is the legal waters that you need to swim?
That's a great question. And a lot of CPAs will come across that many times in their career. What small business owners and taxpayers should know is that no CPA is ever obligated to report anything that they find is in non-compliance to any government agencies or any type of enforcement agency, which should provide some relief to small business owners hearing this, because a lot of people will be too scared to find a professional, knowing that they've built their business a certain way, that they're worried about what that might bring them if someone else were to find out about what's going on with their business. And to those small business owners, or to those business owners, I would say, don't be fearful of that. Talk to a professional, a real qualified professional, someone who has nothing to gain from seeing what you've built come apart. Find that person, talk to them. They will let you know what they're comfortable with and helping you navigate, and what they're not. And from there, you'll be able to make a better decision about who you actually want to invite to peek behind the curtain of what you're doing in your business. And what I tell clients and who have come to me with similar situations is, it's a good thing you came to me first before you received a notice from the government or you had enforcement activity pick up in your area so that we can get ahead of this and fix it before it becomes a bigger problem down the line.
But wouldn't you, as a CPA, let's say you're starting working with a business, you found some shady stuff, aren't you also liable? And if, let's say, they got in a problem with law enforcement, wouldn't you also be liable because you're entangled in that in that mess?
Definitely. Yeah. There's a certain way that you have to approach it as a CPA, and a good CPA will know how to help you through that situation. Someone who's maybe not as experienced, it might be a little bit too much for them to take on. But a good experienced CPA who has dealt with that before, they know the reality of running a small business is not everything is compliant at the beginning. You know, everyone starts out in the way that they can. They will take on credit card debt. They will do what they can to make ends meet. And working with someone at a time where you're able to go back and say, okay, you know what? The way that I had started this, looking back on it, maybe not the best way to have done it, but I'm in a position now where I can bring in a professional and they can help me get cleaned up as I move forward. And so you, as a CPA, you definitely have to tread carefully. They won't be able to help you with everything. It depends on the nature of your business and what your underlying issues look like. But a good CPA, I believe, will at least provide you the advice that you need to get out of that situation. And if it's not them that helps you now, maybe it's their advice that you take, come back a year from now, 2 years, to come back and then be able to work with that CPA.
I want to start talking about your firm and what you do and how you do it. And when people are watching, they're looking at a young guy. There's, of course, no offense to being young. Mark Zuckerberg created an empire when he was like in his 20s. And same, like all great people age has no say in whether how smart the person is or how credible they are or what kind of quality of work they deliver. But a lot of other people on the other side say, oh, this other CPA firm have been in the business for 40 years. So how would you set your firm, your CPA firm, apart from like those older firms? Is this the technology that you guys use, or can you explain more about what sets you apart?
There's a lot of ways to answer that question. I guess the first thing I would say is, speaking on the experience part, is that experience is not something to be understated. I think that coming into it, especially starting out so young, I'm 26 years old right now. And I think that when some people hear that or they see how young I look, they will question the credibility, the expertise. And I think it's a valid question for them to ask. What I would tell them is that with every incoming presidency, new administration, the tax laws change. And the tax laws change whether I'm 26 years old or whether I'm 40 years old, 15 years down the line in the industry. And so the experience and the training that a 40-year-old CPA might receive, someone who's been in the industry for 15 years versus a 26-year-old, I've been actually working in accounting now for about 7 years in public accounting, doing audits and taxes. And I happen to get an early start, I think. I think when I talk to a lot of other CPAs, a lot of them are older, and I knew I wanted to get out there on my own. But in reality, the training that a 15-year experienced CPA is going to get compared to me as a 7-year experienced CPA, we're attending the same classes. We're meeting the same, educators, and we're networking with the same individuals, other CPAs, especially these days where everything is very connected online. I have a lot more access to a bigger community of CPAs than what a lot of these CPAs who have been in the industry for 30, 40 years might have had when they first started out. And so I do tend to rely on my network a lot more, but to me, it's telling me and it's taught me that it's so much more important to get out there, meet new people, even if it's someone that you might never do business with, it's someone that you can learn something from, good or bad. And I rely on that. On top of that, I grew up in an age where technology is very prevalent. I mean, I didn't grow up exactly on a touchscreen device, but by the time I was in high school, it was all over the place. And so my college courses were also taught utilizing that technology and accounting, using Excel, the computer, and learning all of that has allowed me to see what technology can do to a very traditional industry that has been around for 100+ years, where it was heavily reliant on paper, mailing tax returns out, letting them be processed 6 months down the line after it's been filed. Meeting clients face-to-face in person, I think, is still very important as well. But there's certain things that traditional CPAs and accounting firms will do that I think are outdated. And technology is a big part of that, for sure.
Yeah, we've got AI now. And I think whoever adopts AI faster and jump and become comfortable with this technology, they will get a leeway in business today. Is AI usable in your industry, or is still not so much?
Yeah, that's a great question that everyone is asking too, especially in accounting. There's a lot of talk about accounting replacing bookkeepers and automating a lot of that stuff. I really don't see that happening at the level that it's at right now. I think it's still very early on. I mean, even around the time of the pandemic, we're in 2025. 5 years ago, there wasn't really a ChatGPT out there. Not, at least not as accessible on your phone or your computer. And so the fact that it's everywhere now, people have it on their phones. They're using it to do Google searches instead. They're doing it through ChatGPT. I think it's becoming a lot more prevalent. I don't see it really replacing the staffing in the industry just quite yet. I think it's going to take some more time.
It does some data analysis. Like if you dump some data into ChatGPT, it can organize it, synthesize it, clean it. You can do some inference. How reliable is yet to be decided, but I think it's getting there. But my personal experience with ChatGPT in the context of creating copywriting for advertising and marketing purposes, sometimes it frustrates me. It drives me nuts more than it helps. Sometimes I'd rather just write it myself and get it over with. Even a basic email, which a lot of people think that AI is going to replace email writing, but there's something about it. Like when you're writing an email, there's so many little things, emotional intelligence, I don't know what you want to call it, that is so hard, because when I'm writing to you is different when I'm writing to this other person. Everybody, you have to, there's something about human intelligence that is still hard to replicate, but of course it can be useful to certain tasks, but not everything. And this is kind of like my experience with it so far.
I would agree with that. And especially for stuff that's a little bit more technical, like tax law and tax codes. I've asked it some questions just to see where it's at. It does not provide the right response. So it's definitely not something to rely on. It's a great tool, just like any other AI or computer technology is, but it's not a replacement for the end result, which is going to be something that has to be vetted by someone with experience. And relationships, for sure, I think AI will always struggle with that.
All right. So with Claudio Gil CPA firm, what is the process? I know that I've been recently onboarded, but if you can explain, kind of outline the process of people hiring you, what's the process?
Yeah, it always starts with getting in touch. There's a free consultation where I learn more about what that business owner has going on, what they have specific to their tax situation that might be unique to them compared to the average taxpayer. And from there, I'm able to determine what kind of services that they'll need. And the best part about that process is, first, it's free. And so people shouldn't be afraid to at least get some information about what their situation looks like from the perspective of a professional. But the second best part is that my pricing specifically is fixed. And this can be very different from a traditional CPA where they might do hourly billing for the services that they provide. And to me, this is really important because hourly billing, as I see it, is disaligned with what the client wants versus what the service provider wants. Me as a business owner, as a service provider billing hourly, I want to maximize my profits, my revenues. And so I'm going to try to bill as much as I can, which means I'm going to try to take as much time as I can. For the client, they want to pay the least amount possible for the highest level of service. Well, if they want a service that's rushed because they don't want to pay too much, they're not going to get the highest level of service. And so the client is looking for a service provider who's going to spend the least amount of time on their taxes or on their business. The business owner is looking for a client who's willing to pay the most for the most amount of time that they can spend on a client. And those two incentives are disaligned. I mean, one of them is looking for something completely different than the other, and not even completely different. It's totally against what the other person wants. So with fixed fee pricing, I understand what the client has going on, and I'm able to put together a service package where they can pick and choose which level of service they need and know exactly what the pricing is going to be, when it's going to come out. If we can do, a lot of CPAs will also be more transactional in the terms of they will charge annually, maybe for annual tax prep or whatever it might be. If we can split up that cost over 12 months, as opposed to having to pay in one large lump sum each year, then you also provide a level of service that's more accessible to a small business owner than someone who has cash waiting around to be spent in a larger lump sum. And so not only do they understand exactly what they're getting in the services that they're paying for, they understand exactly how much they're paying, when they're paying it, and what's all included in that. And so after the services are discussed and an engagement is made, then we start with a kickoff call. We'll set them up, with access to our secure client portal. There's a mobile app for that. It's all online, very convenient for people to upload their documents. Schedule the kickoff call, have the kickoff call where we rediscuss everything that we've agreed to in terms of service, pricing, timelines. And then we go over information that we might need to fulfill the services so we can get started versus what we've received so far and then what's next. And so all that can take place within the span of about 2 weeks from start to finish, depending on what the exact needs are of that client, how complex their business is, and those kinds of factors.
It's very interesting because when we started to work together, you wanted some documents. I was like, let me send it to you by email. And you said, no, client portal. And I understand totally that concern of cybersecurity a lot of people have. Like, oh, what if this guy's email got hacked or something? Mm-hmm. So that client portal provides some sort of security for the documents being shared.
Exactly. Yep.
So I love that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Email, depending on how your internet is set up, right, and your cybersecurity is set up, email can be secure. It'll never be as secure as a company that's devoted to the security of people's files, especially working with taxpayers.
Yeah, and you mentioned pricing and the fixed fee. That's also a huge plus, because a lot of people, not only they have to write the tax check by April, they will also have to write another check, usually a big one for the CPA who work on an annual basis. And having to dividing that amount over the year makes it much more digestible and easier for business owners. But still, a lot of business owners are wondering and are intimidated by a CPA fees. Mm-hmm. Could you shed some light on the rates that you charge on a monthly basis?
Yeah, definitely. So I work primarily with small business owners and real estate investors. And so typically their tax reporting is going to be a little bit more complex, just based off the nature of what they have to report. You have to track income and expenses on the business or on the real estate property, determine how that's going to be reported, whether an LLC makes sense, if it's an S corporation, all that kind of stuff. My individual tax prep fees start at $800 per year. And the business tax return fees, this is for a separate business entity. If there's a partnership, S corporation, C corporation that needs to be filed, that will require a separate business tax return. That'll be typically about $1,500 per year. And that will cover 95% of my client situations. There are certain circumstances, such as if a client has foreign tax reporting requirements, like a rental property in another country, or they're a business owner, a partner in another business outside of the United States, that information is required to be reported to the IRS. And so they have different forms and complexities associated with that. That might increase the fee, maybe $125, $250, depending on the situation. But for the most part, everything is pretty much fixed at $800 for individuals, $1,500 for businesses. For those business owners or individuals looking for ongoing tax planning services, they're typically looking at fees anywhere from $3,000 to $4,500, and that is split up into 12 monthly payments. And the reason why it's such a big range, it's a $1,500 range, is because it depends on the level of service that they need. Some people, they feel good about tracking their own books and doing their own bookkeeping, tracking their income, their expenses, providing that information over to me. Other people are completely allergic to bookkeeping, and they would prefer that they don't even have to think about it. They hand that off to me. That'll increase the fee in certain situations. So,
and just for context, some tax preparer that are not CPA, and they kind of charge a similar amount. So your fees are very, very manageable.
That's good to hear. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Claudio, let's talk about you. Where did you grow up? How was your childhood? And what gets you into accounting?
Yeah, I love sharing this story because to me, it really is such a profound thing to be able to do the work that I do. So I was born and raised in Southern California, specifically in the San Fernando Valley area. A lot of my family is there. My parents had immigrated from Latin America. And so my mom's family came from Mexico. My dad's family came from Peru. They came here when they were 16, 18 years old. And what I see from their journey and the journey of people who are doing similar kinds of big changes, having to get up and leave their home to come to United States, is that it can be very difficult at first to get established. And so my parents coming out here, they found amazing opportunities in being entrepreneurs because they could determine what their income is and what they're doing and how they're spending their time more so than if they were working a W-2 job as an employee. And don't get me wrong, not every business starts out so profitable, right? So they had to make ends meet and were working jobs, but they really leaned into entrepreneurship, and I call them serial entrepreneurs. Growing up, I have 4 other siblings. We grew up in the world of entrepreneurship every single day. And so when we weren't in school, we were at their businesses, helping them out or just spending time there because they couldn't afford to leave us at home unsupervised, whatever the case might be.
What kind of businesses they had?
They did a lot. They had a restaurant, and they expanded to about 2 restaurants before they stopped working in the restaurant industry. Insurance agents, real estate agents, construction, and right now they're working as a Mexican food manufacturer, which is doing really well, and also a small family farm as well, where they raise organic produce, eggs, sell them at farmers markets.
They did it all.
They did it all. Yeah, they really did.
And you are their CPA.
I'm there. Yes. Yeah. Me and my family, I'm actually working with my brother too, to do some bookkeeping for the family business. And so, yeah, we wanted to give back to our family first and foremost. And it drew me to accounting because growing up, I could see how if they had a CPA working with them the entire time, things could have been a lot different. And they would have been able to reap more of the hard work that they were doing year after year after year. And so now being a CPA myself, I'm able to give back to people like my parents who, for the first time, they're wanting to build a legacy, something bigger than themselves, provide for their family and provide for the next generation. And now I can provide those services to them at a rate that is hopefully affordable and competitive. I mean, based on what you said, it seems to be pretty accessible for small business owners. And I'm getting a lot of clients and things are going well. And it's so profound to me because I really am helping out people like my mom, like my dad. And I wouldn't want to work with someone who I wouldn't myself give that level of service to my mom or my dad or anything like that. So I really try to take care of my clients. I mean, to me, it's like my family.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. And, we have a big giant moon here. And I was telling you the story about like when I saw that moon, it inspired me to call this show Moon Shooters or Moonshots. But I realized that there's one show on YouTube that's called Moonshots. Oh, okay. So I'm thinking, let's call it Moon Shooters. And the idea here is that when we interview entrepreneurs, I mean, including myself, we are forcing nature to our will, so to speak. We are in charge of our own destiny. If we don't provide value, we don't eat. And so it takes a different breed of people to seek entrepreneurship and do it and actually succeed in it. And it's so much harder than the media portrays. And it took a lot of deep will and determination and suffering and to get off the ground. Some people compare entrepreneurship to a tree. So when you put a seed in the soil, that seed disappears in the soil for sometimes a lot of time, months. And all this seed is doing in the soil is pushing against the dirt, against the pressure, and then forming roots. Even before it goes up, it's just living in the dark and pushing against the soil for months until it start going up. And when people see a big, nice tree and it's fruitful, they're like, how beautiful it is. But they don't know how much hard work and determination and things that were below the surface, pushing against all of that pressure. So I feel like this is what entrepreneurship is about. And I think that my mission, that's why I love my job so much. If I'm able just to shed light on stories like that, and people who want to be moon shooters, people who want to take a shot on the moon, and even if they miss, they will land among the stars. So how do you see your role as an entrepreneur? Like, do you feel that, talk to me about your experience in getting into that, because I'm sure that you have bills to pay and it's hard. And when you decided to take that leap, take the next step, there was a lot of uncertainty. So walk me through what made you make that move?
I think it's a great question, and it's one that every entrepreneur faces, whether they're ready to answer that question or not, right? And so for me, getting started, I'm starting a lot younger probably than what most maybe CPAs or what other people would be willing to start with. And to me, I see that as an advantage for a couple of reasons. One, my bills and responsibilities outside of work are not going to be the same of someone who has a family, has a mortgage that they have to pay, has, multiple car payments or insurance payments, something like that, that if they don't do that for their family, they will be in a much more stressful situation. I did start it, I am on my own. I have bills. I live outside my parents' homes and stuff like that. And not to say my parents were not supportive, they were very supportive. And I think it really takes a village. I mean, whether it's your parents, your family, your friends, there's a lot to go through when you're doing entrepreneurship. But I found that getting started as soon as possible and even making the mistakes, earning those failures, I'll say earning those failures, because you really learn so much from just putting yourself out there, seeing what works, and then learning what doesn't work. And to me, that has provided me so much value, so much so that I'm 26 years old with my own accounting practice. Things are going well, very blessed and very privileged to be where I'm at. But a lot of it came at the cost of making those mistakes, having those failures, being scared, and sometimes crying. I mean, there's nothing to hide when it comes to entrepreneurship. Crying sometimes when it was something that was just so overwhelming to me with such decisions I have to make, and not knowing whether the decision I make is the right decision or the wrong decision. I won't know until it plays out. But I am learning, and I'm comfortable with the fact that I can fail, and I probably will fail in certain aspects of the decisions that I make for my business. And that's okay, because if I can learn from that and then learn to not do that next time, or to do it better next time until I can figure it out, I'll have, right now, 10 years from now, I'll be in a much better spot than where I'm at today. It will have come at the cost of those failures.
Can you give some examples of these mistakes?
One good example is financing something that I maybe couldn't afford, but I have access to a credit card that I can put it on, and making that decision and then not being able to recoup that investment at a future date because the investment just didn't work out. For me, it was more of the terms of buying a lot of supplies, materials, equipment. And this might be before my CPA practice phase, where helping my parents, getting invested in there, is really where I was sharpening the saw so much too, because I grew up in that environment, learning from it. And so wanting to contribute, wanting to help out, making those decisions without maybe having all the right information or not being fully prepared for what the negative consequence might be if it doesn't work out, has taught me that I need to be a little bit more judicious with how I make these decisions, what information I'm making these decisions on. If is it a reliable source of information, or is it something that is filled with hope and idealism that is just something that I'm hanging on to, even though when all the signs are pointing to it not being the case. And so making large investments in supplies and materials and then not being able to recoup that investment, either it didn't sell, materials got wasted, something got lost, I think is...
it's so interesting. A CPA making financial mistakes.
Yeah.
But that's you're human in the end, even if you know the numbers, but you're human. Mm-hmm. How did you get your first client?
My first client came through word of mouth. It was actually through like a networking opportunity.
Were you in BNI at the time or no?
I was not in BNI at the time. I was actually a part of a club called Rotary, which is a nonprofit group.
I know Rotary. I'm also a member.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. And I'm still a member too, and it's great. But I joined Rotary because I wanted to network, and I also wanted to give back to my community. Rotary is less about business. It's more about, volunteering and raising money for the community and doing projects. But of course, you see those people frequently. You hang out with them at those events. You build trust. You build a relationship with them. And they're going to come to work with you as opposed to someone that they find just off the street or on Google or something like that. They know you, and they're going to want to support you. And so my first client actually came from a Rotary event. It was the first club that I joined. I introduced myself to the club, the rest of the members, let them know that I'm a CPA. I'm out on my own here, and I'm building up my practice. And I had someone who immediately after that meeting had come up to me, said, "This must be, divine," but they were looking for a CPA, and I just so happened to walk into their club and be that CPA for them. And so they were my first client. They're still a client. They actually recently upgraded the level of service that they're receiving. So it started out as tax prep and tax planning, is now more advisory, fractional CFO services, where I'm working directly with their staff members at their business to help upskill their staff members and then improve the financials so that they can make better decisions about how they want to grow their business.
Were you nervous?
I was super nervous. Yeah. I'm nervous almost every step of the way when it comes to business.
Wow.
And I think it's normal for people to be nervous. And what sets entrepreneurs apart maybe from other people who are not as courageous is that they feel those nerves and they do it anyway.
Exactly. Right? Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. What's your future plans, your goals? What's your moonshot? Where do you want to go?
Yeah. So my plan is to expand the team, get more clients, and just provide more value to people. I think that's it at the end of the day. Meet more people, let them know about what I do and how I do it. And if it's something that I can help them with, great. And if not, then it's totally fine too. And let's stay in contact and, let's help each other grow. If I can mention or introduce you to some of my clients who might benefit from your services, that's another way to help you grow too, right? And that's a way to add value. And so I'm really looking forward to the future of just meeting new people, providing as much value as possible to everyone that I come across, and hopefully leaving every situation better than when I found it. And that translates to a lot of different things, but I want a big team to support that. And I want to be financially independent. I want the business to be successful in the sense that it provides not only for me and my family, but for multiple employees, other family members who might want to team up with me. I mentioned my brother earlier, who's looking to join the team, and so we're talking about that. And so that's really the near future for me is if I can get as close to that as possible, whether I land on the moon or among the stars, then I think I'll be very happy.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Naja. I really appreciate it. And it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. And I'll definitely be back. We'll be back.
Awesome. Thank you.